Hey everybody, it is August 7th, 2025, here with your nightly watch list video. Um, let's just kind of talk a little bit about what was going on in the market today. We're kind of right in the heart of earnings season, right? Yesterday, today, and even on Tuesday, we're just getting all these reports, and it's just kind of crazy volatility out there. I think, you start to see a name like Duolingo, and it just kind of speaks to partially what we have been seeing for the last few weeks, where you get these nice gap ups, everything's looking pretty damn good, and then all of a sudden this thing is slamming. And this is not the only time we have seen action like this, right? Some of them are coming from new all-time highs after pretty extended runs. Some of this is happening coming off the bottom, but this is just seemingly happening everywhere we look. We do have some pretty big volatility in the cybersecurity space, the software sector. You can kind of see a name like NOW kicked off our earnings season a few weeks ago. You had the gap up, kind of hit this little level of resistance here, and then instantly rejected, continuation lower. And it's just kind of been the theme. You could look at a name like PanW, continuation lower, CrowdStrike, continuation lower on a pickup in volume. That's not super pretty. And we've talked about this before. When you start living under your 50-day, you want to be a little bit more cautious because things can actually start to unwind. The 50-day for me is like the first major red flag. And then obviously living below the 200 simple moving average is where things can get pretty disgusting. So there are some names acting well, but it's kind of narrow in terms of the names that are acting well and following through. Hood, Palantir, obviously the two most obvious. And then recently, well, should I just say today, crypto, Ethereum, more than anything. Ethereum, Bitcoin, Solana, XRP. XRP had some news in after hours. They're done with some court case or something like that. I forget exactly what it was. Caused XRP to kind of get moving. So really, we're just, with us being in the heart of earnings season, I think it's just good to be mindful of how much exposure you are putting on here, especially one to the long side, without us having really gone through a correction. When you're seeing action like this, when you're seeing a great company like Eli Lilly have its worst down day, down 14%, it's its like worst day in 25 years on 20 million shares traded. It's the worst day for an Eli Lilly in what they say 20 years. So you start to hear news like that, see action like this. It is good to just be kind of on your toes, a little bit more cautious with what you're doing, how much exposure you're taking. I did buy Hood today, so there is that. And this one closed very nicely. And then on the flip side, I wish I would have shorted Joby. We talked about this looking super identical to QS. And it's just kind of good to, look back at it, why I was saying that. But regardless what I was saying, I didn't short it, and I ended up going with IONQ instead. I did hold my short overnight, so no real issues, but I shorted it once and then ended up getting stopped out and then reshorted it again. So I reshorted kind of this rejection and this move lower, and then I got stopped out, and then I had to reshort it as we were rejecting the 50-day. So, it wasn't the best closer for me, and for some reason, I'm finding decent short ideas, but I'm shorting the wrong names seemingly all the time at the wrong time. So it's even difficult for me to gain some traction on the short side. But if the market does start to undergo some pressure, right, names that have been gapping down on earnings, or kind of having a poor reaction to their respective earnings, are the names that I would like to focus on, whether it is going to be a Joby or a TSSI, which I made mention of several times over the last few weeks. This one kind of feels like it's going to have an AEVA, kind of an unwind, probably to the mid-teens is what I would naturally think. But yeah, there are still names acting well. Like I said, a Hood did exactly what I was hoping for. You get this big move up, you start to get several weeks of digestion, you get nice and tight, build some higher lows, and then, I came in there and bought the first 5-minute opening range break. think it closed really well, but I don't want to get too aggressive on brand new merchandise here without some bigger digestion in the market. So that's kind of my thinking at the moment. I think both sides of the market are completely playable. I thought, buying a hood today was completely logical, and the setup, from a technical perspective, makes complete sense. I thought, something like Ethereum, and I mentioned ETHU, made some sense. I was hoping that I'd be able to buy through the 115 level. We get the gap up over that level, so I don't come in and chase it. And then, here we are, 131, 132. So just seeing how quickly these things can move. Ideally, this thing will just pause here just underneath 128 bucks, and then next week off to the races would be the ideal scenario. We will see if XRP can kind of follow along, and then you've got an XXRP, which I also think could be playable. Here you are, $52 in after hours. So these things are moving. It does feel a little bit like the crypto space has some life left all on its own, and that's totally fine if they want to move alone. I've got no issue with it. Something like an IBIT, that was just in this long consolidation, tried to break down tennis ball action, recovery, love that kind of thing where it just shakes people out, myself included, and then, recovers, and then you either miss the breakout, but I would be more than comfortable with potentially rebuying this thing as a 20 simple moving average undercut and rally as soon as tomorrow. Now, I don't know if I'd be able to hold it into the weekend if I can't get enough cushion and we, get a decent push at the open and really throughout the entirety of the day. So I'll be thoughtful of that. Obviously, crypto, owning IBIT, it's not something that you can micromanage over the weekend. So if I don't have a bit of a cushion on it, I would feel a little bit more uncomfortable holding it without some form of cushion. So, but guys, it is littered with volatility out there. Duolingo, Eli Lilly, those are just the latest cases of what we are seeing in the market. I didn't think anything entirely wrong. I thought the market held in there fairly well, especially closer towards the end of the day. I think that is in large part due to Apple trying to get back above its 200 simple moving average. Congratulations to Apple. It is very nice to see big move in an MSTR, reclaimed its 50 simple moving average. So for now, I won't talk too much crap about it. And then obviously, I just mentioned IBIT as something that is acting better. So if IBIT's going to act better, Bitcoin's going to act better, I suspect that an MSTR could also act better. No real opinions, to be completely honest with you. I don't necessarily want to own either of, a coin or an MSTR. I'd rather own IBIT or ETHU or XXRP or even SOLT for Solana, the ETFs more than anything. So that's just kind of my thinking as it relates to that. Going through the scans, I still think that there are some names that are acting well, but it feels like the rally is narrowing kind of as we go. The more I look, there is carnage everywhere. But on the flip side of that, there are names acting well. Obviously, the gold miners, those were buyable on Monday. Really nice all-week move for the gold miners. And then, kind of as we go down the list, you could look at a name like Dell. This is acting pretty damn awesome. DoorDash with the kind of a gap up and hold for its respective earnings. I think Tesla is coiling up here in a pretty big, significant way. If we can get above the 200 simple moving average, maybe a 200 simple moving average undercut and rally. For the semi space, Monolithic Power, it's not the slowest of names, so that's good. Plenty liquid, ideally a few more days of tightening. The one thing I don't like about the semi space is, it's kind of a split up group right now. Not all of them are acting best, but with that said, there are some names that are acting well enough to make me potentially want to take this thing if we can tighten up. Rambus is another name, just a little bit more tightening required here, and then maybe a break of these all-time highs. Also not a very slow name. If crypto is going to continue, Iron, I think, looks pretty dang good. This one's kind of a laggard wolf, but I think this one's hanging in there, trying to establish itself above the 200 fairly well. If the metals continue, and really more than anything, an MP, if this one can continue, I think maybe a little bit more speculative, but you could potentially go 4Us here. This one can potentially go as a high type flag. A little bit more digestion, I think, would look a bit cleaner. We just talked about IBIT. Ideally, this one can tighten. AOI just reported earnings in after hours. Yes, a little bit of a washout. Held in there pretty well. I would be comfortable buying this thing as a 200 simple moving average undercut rally, effectively needing to take out today's highs in order for me to be interested in it. So it's got a little bit of work to do, but one I'm still not taking my eyes off of. Didn't think this was a terrible reaction, but I won't judge it until tomorrow. Alibaba, yes, these things are super volatile, and here we go, overnight gapping down. I've mentioned it once, twice, 10 times. 124 is the level. It'll continue to be the level, and I wouldn't buy it until that level can get taken out. Carvana, I don't think it's doing anything too terrible. It's not very extended from the 50 simple moving average, which is what I like. This could very well just be a higher low setup. Again, here being your low, this being a higher low. In order for this thing to get going, needs to take out today's highs. Don't know that it is going to do that tomorrow, but definitely going to keep it on watch going forward. Shopify, another one of these. Could this be a high volume close play, right? You've got your high volume close, 154.90. I am not a buyer in Shopify until we could take out that, call it 155 level, and then I would be comfortable coming in to buy it. I saw some of you guys in the room today, and it's totally fine. It's just something to think about. And I mentioned it already. When the market is this extended, it's one thing to come in on day two and buy a high volume close, but this isn't like last quarter, right, guys? Now, over the last 3 months, we've gone up 40%, right? So this is not the same. It's not the same environment. The setups might look the same, but the environment is different. And I think the best move right now is when a stock gaps up on earnings, and I saw a few of you guys, buying 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 names that are gapping up on earnings. It's like, slow down, please, slow down. If you can't gain traction on one position, why are you getting a second and a third and a fourth, right? It's like, get a position. See if a stock is gapping up on earnings, and one, that's good news. That's healthy, but you don't know if it's going to sell off or not. And a lot of the names recently, if you've been paying attention, you're getting these gap ups: Duolingo, Roblox, Microsoft, right? And you're getting these gap ups, and then you're just getting a fade right away. Right from jump. So if you're buying multiple gap ups, you're going to get your ass kicked because they've already, even SoFi, right? You get the gap up, right? SoFi, you get a gap up and then you just sell off, right? You look at Roblox, you get the gap up and then you sell off. Look at Microsoft, right? You get the gap up and then you sell off, right? We talked about NOW. You get the gap up and then you sell off, right? And so obviously Duolingo today, you get the huge gap up and then you just sell off. So it's like, if you're not paying attention to that and then you think you're going to come in on day one on a gap up after the market's made a 40% move and just think that 3 brand new fresh gap up longs is the way to go, you're not reading the room properly. And you obviously, I tell you guys in the room this with love. I don't want you guys to lose money, but you have to use progressive exposure. It's one of the best ways to make sure you don't paper cut yourself to death. And then secondly, we talked about high volume closes being a legitimate setup and a great way to try and get yourself positioned on potentially day 2 or day 3. But if you're going even for Shopify to buy it as it's taking out yesterday's highs or really the closing price, and the market's pulling back, right? How likely are you to gain traction on a position if the market's pulling back at the time you're buying something, right? Your stock now has to immediately fight the underlying smaller time frame trend of the market, and the easiest trades to hold are the ones that go green for you right away, and you're not even fighting a smaller time frame trend, right? So that's important to remember. If the NASDAQ was coming down, which it was, right, and you're out here buying, you know, even Shopify, right? If you're out here buying Shopify and the market's doing this, right, you're likely not going to get much traction on any position, let alone something that just had a humongous gap up the prior day, let alone something that just had a huge gap up and the market's up 40%. Like, you have to remember, it's pretty likely that the market's running out of a little bit of steam here. So if the market's running out of steam and needs to digest, buying these massive gap ups, one, isn't the best idea on earnings, especially when you've seen SoFi, you've seen Now, you've seen Duolingo, you've seen Microsoft, you've seen Carvana, you've seen all these names gap up and then immediately start to come under some pressure. And so, or really just getting imploded on earnings, right? Dave and Sezzle, as an example, right? So you get Dave and you get just this absolute, and by the way, this was a little bit of a gap up overnight. And then all of a sudden reports earnings in the morning, kind of goes flat and then just gets absolutely demolished, right? Sezzle, same thing. And after hours, just absolutely destroyed. So what we're seeing in the market is, if you're paying attention, is we're either gapping down on earnings big time, or we're gapping up and instantly being met with some sellers, or you're gapping up and then maybe you're holding your Palantir or maybe your Hood, or it's a select few names, right? Even Coin, after making a huge move, big gap down, hanging out near the lows, right? Even in Amazon, big gap down, trying to give us that tennis ball action. So it's just good to make sure that if you're buying something, considering where the market has come from, don't buy the earnings gap ups here, guys. Wait for continuation setups. Again, I know there's a few students in the room who chose to buy a few earnings gap ups. I bet you that they learned their lesson quickly and they won't be doing that again tomorrow or the day after. They will be waiting for continuation setups. And even when you go and take your continuation setup, please be thoughtful of what the market is doing at the time you go to buy something, right? If you go to buy something when the market's actually pressing higher, even on that smaller time frame, 60-minute, 30-minute, 5-minute, right? You're more than likely going to get, especially if if they're correlated to the NASDAQ, right? If you're buying a tech name, you should be paying attention to the NASDAQ. If I'm buying a crude oil stock, I'm paying attention to crude oil. If I'm buying a gold miner, I'm looking at gold. If I'm buying MicroStrategy, I'm paying attention to Bitcoin. I mean, right? And so that should be some sort of logic right there. So anyway, guys, I don't want to keep rambling on. The market's kind of in a little bit of a tricky spot here. We've gone up a lot. There are names that look pretty good. I think Tesla looks pretty interesting. I think Hood continues to act well. Maybe we get some continuation there from this, nice digestion. Otherwise, I personally don't see enough clean bases. I am seeing really nice reaction to individual earnings. There are a few more names that I guess I could mention. Another name that reported today, probably one of my favorite and cleanest setups, is this KTOS. Little bit of a push down, recovered, but we have to just kind of take out this little flat pivot, 61.5, something like that, with a nice pickup in volume in order for me to be interested. Today it held the 20, built a series of higher lows. Do we kind of continue to hold there? Maybe a little sneaker in right above today's highs, and then, off to the races over 61.5. So Kind of a lot to talk about. I'm sure I could keep going, but long enough. Just please keep in mind what I have said. There are things that are looking well. The crypto space, looks like it'd just be a crypto party all by itself. It's possible. I have no crystal ball, so I don't know, and nor do I care. I wanted to buy ETHU today, but then it gapped up, and I couldn't chase it. So especially not in this market. And yeah, we'll see. We'll just continue to take things one day at a time, one setup at a time. Please use progressive exposure. It's the way that you stop yourself from getting your ass kicked. There are names, if the market starts to come under pressure, that are shortable. Maybe something like Joby continues a little bit lower. Names that are getting beaten up on their individual earnings and sticking lower is something to consider on the short side if the market starts to come under pressure. So anyway, hopefully this video finds you guys well, and I will see you guys bright and early in the morning. Cheers.